Most people believe they understand Freemasonry. Mysterious symbols, hidden chambers, whispered rumors about secret power. But almost no one knows the deeper story, the one whispered only behind closed doors. And fewer still have stood where I once stood, on the threshold of a level almost no one reaches. When I was informed that I had been selected for what they called the sovereign invitation, I thought it was an honor, a recognition of years of commitment, a symbolic ritual, nothing more. Everyone told me the same thing. It's just tradition, just allegory. Don't overthink it. But the moment I stepped into that chamber, I felt something was different, something ancient, something heavy. The room was colder than the hallways outside, yet no vents, no windows. The air tasted old, as if untouched for decades. There were no electrical lights, only a ring of candles flickering against stone walls, casting long shadows that seemed to move on their own. A man stepped toward me, his face hidden under the deep hood of a dark robe. His voice was calm, almost too calm, as he recited the words I will never forget. From this moment onward, you will speak only with your eyes. Your tongue belongs to us. Your silence protects you. Your silence protects us. I tried to convince myself it was symbolic, a dramatic performance meant to intimidate or test my resolve. But the seriousness in the room told a different story. None of the men watching me blinked. None shifted. None breathed louder than a whisper. They placed their hands on my shoulders, not harshly but firmly enough to make sure I felt the weight of what was happening. I was given a blindfold, but before it covered my vision, I caught a glimpse of something carved into the stone floor. An ancient symbol I had never seen before in any ritual, book, or lodge I'd ever been part of. And then came the vow, spoken slowly, deliberately, as if binding more than just words. By silence you ascend, by silence you survive, by silence you serve the light in the dark. The oath felt less like a promise and more like a warning. For years I kept that silence. For years I carried what I saw, what I learned, what I was shown. But tonight, that oath breaks. Tonight, the silence ends. There are rooms in any organization, any fraternity, any society that people know by name but never enter. And then, there are rooms whose very existence is denied. Rooms that live only in whispers. Rooms that are never documented, never photographed, never mentioned even between trusted members. For me, that room was known only as the inner chamber. It wasn't on any blueprint. It wasn't marked by any sign. The hallway that led to it was dim, narrow, and strangely quiet, as if the sound died before it reached the door. Two men escorted me, neither speaking. Their steps were synchronized, almost rehearsed. The corridor felt like it stretched forever, though logically it couldn't have been more than 20 paces. But something about it distorted my sense of time. My heartbeat felt louder than my footsteps. Then we reached the door. It wasn't grand. It wasn't ornate. It was plain. Too plain. Like it wanted to be forgotten. One of the men whispered almost breathlessly, "Beyond this point you observe only. You question nothing." The door opened without a sound. The chamber was circular, built of dark stone that seemed carved, not constructed, as though it had been part of the building long before the building existed. The air inside was colder, heavier. Not the kind of cold you feel on your skin. The kind that settles somewhere deeper, in your chest, in your bones. Symbols covered the walls, but not the ones people associate with Freemasonry. These were older, sharper, more unsettling. Some looked like spirals, others like intersecting runes. A few resembled eyes, too lifelike for comfort. There were no chairs except one. At the center was a solitary seat made of black wood, smooth and impossibly polished. And in that seat sat a man whose presence swallowed the room. Not because he was loud, not because he was intimidating in stature, but because he looked at me as if he had already read every thought, every memory, every secret I ever carried. He spoke only 7 words. The world sees what we permit it. I didn't understand at the time, but I felt it deeply, instinctively, that this room was where decisions were made far above ritual, symbolism, or brotherhood. This was not a ceremony. This was not tradition. This was control. And the moment I stepped out of that chamber, I knew that nothing I thought I understood would ever be the same again. For most people, the 33rd degree is the ceiling, the highest point, the final step, the end of the ladder. They imagine it as a throne of power, a place where secrets are finally revealed. But once I reached it, I learned something unsettling. The top is never the top. There is always a door behind the door. I first heard whispers of something beyond during a gathering reserved only for high-degree members. The conversations were controlled, polite, and meticulously vague, yet every now and then someone would mention a phrase that didn't fit the usual rituals. The circle has approved it. The circle will decide. Wait for word from the circle. At first, I assumed it was a committee, a symbolic council, something harmless. But the more I listened, the more I realized something alarming. No one ever explained what the circle was. No one ever questioned it. It was spoken about with a mixture of reverence and fear. Weeks later, during a private convocation, I noticed a pattern. Certain individuals, men who outranked everyone, even other 33rd degree members, were ushered through a side door immediately after the ceremony. They never spoke of where they went, and they never returned with the same expression. Their eyes were quieter. Their demeanor changed, colder, more deliberate. Eventually, one approached me. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't ask questions. He only said one sentence. If they ask, you will say yes. The next night, I was summoned privately. Not to a lodge, not to any room I had seen before. Instead, I was led into a narrow hallway where every sound seemed muffled, as though the air itself wanted to keep secrets. There was no ritual, no candles, no ceremony, just a simple room, empty except for a round table and 4 men seated around it. Their faces were calm, emotionless. They observed me like someone examines a valuable object, quietly, thoroughly, without blinking. One of them finally spoke. The 33rd degree is knowledge. The circle is purpose. I didn't understand, so he clarified with a question that chilled me more than any vow I had ever taken. What are you willing to give up? To step beyond your own life? There was no oath to take, no promise written on paper, only a silent expectation, an unspoken trade. And in that moment I realized, this wasn't a higher degree. This was an entirely different world, a world where influence wasn't earned. It was owned. Leaving wasn't as simple as walking away. It wasn't a membership you cancel. It was a world you untangle yourself from, thread by thread, while wondering which one might snap around your neck. After my encounter with the circle, everything began to feel different. My phone rang at strange hours, always from unknown numbers. I started receiving letters with no return address, short notes reminding me of commitments, expectations, and the path I had stepped onto. None of them were outright threats. But sometimes the quietest messages are the loudest. For weeks, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts raced. My instincts screamed. The teachings I once respected now felt like chains tightening around my ribs. Every conversation felt watched. Every shadow felt heavier than the last. One night, after a particularly silent gathering where nobody dared look each other in the eye, a man I trusted, someone who had once mentored me, pulled me aside. His voice trembled, barely audible. "If you're thinking of leaving," he whispered, "do it before they start asking questions." That was the moment I understood. People didn't leave. They disappeared, quietly, politely, without documentation, without rumor. And I refused to become another silent absence. The decision came to me in the stillness of early morning, when the world feels slightly unreal. I packed only what I needed. I changed my routine, my address, my number. I cut ties with people I cared about, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. At first, I thought the distance would give me peace. It didn't. The silence followed me, like an echo of the oath I had once taken. I would wake at night convinced someone was standing in the room. Every knock on the door felt like a test. Every stranger's glance felt like recognition. But with time, slowly, painfully, I realized something important. No secret has power once it's spoken. Only silence gives it life. And that is why I'm speaking now. Not to accuse, not to expose individuals, but to break the one thing they rely on more than symbols, rituals, or hierarchy: fear. You're not supposed to know that influence can hide in plain sight. You're not supposed to know that the top isn't the top. You're not supposed to know that power prefers the shadows. But you do now, and once a secret is revealed, the darkness loses its grip. Because truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds its way to the surface.